Good morning, Mr. Hudson.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and welcome all to My Life, My Music, our regular podcast with the Governor, Alan Hudson, where we take a trip down memory lane. Huddy, we've covered so much ground over the years. The one ground that we've never covered is your final game. We've talked about your debut, but we've never talked about your final game. So let's start at the end, at the beginning.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to you earlier on,
Yeah.
and it's quite significant. If we talk about leaving Arsenal, was probably the most amazing part of my life, apart from the car accident, obviously, or car ordeal, because I weren't going in. I think we might have gone over this, but it'd be good to do it again because
Absolutely.
I weren't going into train. I fell out with Terry Neal for the last time, and I made my mind up that I couldn't go in working no more. I was frustrated because I had the injury in my stomach, and he didn't believe me first. And if he can call me a liar, then he's not. You can't work with people like that. So I didn't go in, and I was running every day. I was going up Putney Hill, over Wimbledon Common, up the streets in Fulham, and you know where the Hurlingham Club is, where they warm up for Wimbledon and all that. I was running there. They got a track there and everything else, and that was a year that of our song Baker Street,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
But the one, I suppose the significance song of that time was "Take a Chance on Me," ABBA, who give me so much pleasure, from Seattle days onwards. I mean, ABBA were, alongside the Beatles, probably the greatest music makers of all time. In 1978, the Brothers Gibb, they had 5 of the first 8 songs in the charts. Andy Gibb had 2, and the Bee Gees had 3. So that was the year I think that the Bee Gees really took off, wasn't it? How Deep Is Your Love, they brought that was in the charts then, but it led into our friend in Bermuda that we covered, the agent, the gay agent, our friend. Well, that's another story. That's a story on its own in Bermuda, but it all like the jigsaw puzzle again. It all fits in nicely with jumping from one era to another, but they're all got the same. There's always a link there,
Yeah.
And I thought "Take a Chance on Me" I should have sung that every day when I woke up because I couldn't get a club. I'd left Arsenal. I'd walked out. I was training on my own for about 3 months, just running the streets, going in the sauna, in the Turkish baths, doing everything I could to keep me weight down and keep us fit without playing. And it was like "Take a Chance on Me." And I remember I was speaking to the late Bobby Keach, who was at Fulham. When I was a Fulham supporter, he played at Fulham. And he done very well for himself, Bobby Keach. He was friends with Johnny Haynes and all that. And I remember speaking to him, and because I put him for the Fulham job.
Yes.
As player manager. And Bobby Keats said to me, "Al, you got as much chance of swimming the channel, and I can't swim." And he says, Jimmy Hill won't have you in a month of Sundays. He says and I think it was about the time he tried to get Dave Bassett and all that, but he was hell bent on the way Wimbledon played and all that. He said, "You're just not his cup of tea." Well, that was 1978, but in 1975, I put it all together, and Bobby was right straight away. He was spot on. He wouldn't entertain me because I think we spoke about a day I played it in a match for Stoke at Newcastle at St James's Park. We drew 2-2. We played. We should have won about 6-7. We played brilliantly, and I had one of my best matches in a Stoke shirt, in any shirt. And I remember coming home on the train from Newcastle. My family had been on the train with me. My mum and dad went, and uncle, and went on to London, and we got off at Stoke. And I remember about 9:45, I ran into my house Maureen was at home with the young'un, and I said I'm gonna tape Match of the Day because I want this on film the way I played today. Anyway, I put it on tape, ran out the door, and went up to my local pub, and I was telling everybody in the local pub. They said, "How'd you get on today?" Blah blah blah, and I said, "Well, it just don't get any better than that, the performance." I said, "Well, I know we drew 2-2, but we murdered them." I said, "And we had the ball all the time." And I said, you watch Match of the Day tonight or in the morning. I don't even know add it up on in the mornings then, Paul.
Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah, I said, well, if you just get your people to watch Match of the Day tonight and see a performance. Anyway, I got in at what time? 4 in the morning, as usual. 5 in the morning, I don't know. And anyway, I put the replay on in the morning, and I didn't get a mention.
Yeah.
This was on Match of the Day, and it just about sums up how people can watch football and they don't see the game because they just show you what they want to show, And Jimmy Hill was I didn't like him from a young when Fulham didn't want me in the beginning. It was the days of Jimmy Hill and all that people, And my dad was on the phone to me. Oh, I called him. I said, "Did you watch Match of the Day last night?" He said, "Yeah, I did." He said, "It weren't the same game, was it? It weren't the same game. It weren't the game I went to." I said, "No." He said, "That's Jimmy Hill, He said to me, "Al," he says, "Don't worry about Jimmy Hill. Don't worry about people like that." He says, "I've just got the Sunday people." He said, "And Len Shackle and give you 10 out of 10." Yeah. He said, that's who you take notice of, not Jimmy Hill and the likes of that, these people on TV. And it's still going on today. And, they just show you what they want.
Yep.
Highlights. The highlights are not the highlights. The highlights are what they want to show you because they want to brainwash the English public. But so that was around that time of ABBA, 78. And then obviously we go, that was obviously Baker Street was that year, which is said. The music in 78 was absolutely superb, starting from the Bee Gees taking over. And it just makes you wonder, had the Beatles stayed together, them and the Bee Gees, they would have been at each other's throats. Who was the best out of the lot, because the songwriting from Gibb was unbelievable, and the songwriter Lennon McCartney was unbelievable. The kind of music the Beatles would have been playing in 78 would have been mind-boggling.
And both got involved in movies, didn't they? Beatles
Absolutely.
in the 60s and the Bee Gees in the 70s, and pretty much Saturday Night Fever really projected them onto the silver screen, didn't it? I mean, it was phenomenal.
Absolutely, mate, absolutely. I mean, the Beatles films were more like a comic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was more like the Beano, but the Bee Gees took the, especially it found John Travolta.
Yeah.
He never looked back from then. He was fantastic in it, and she was incredible in it. The music was unbelievable, and that was when what was the manager's name?
Who manager?
The Bee Gees.
It was well, Lord Bunbury had a lot to do with the Bee Gees, who you opened the batting with.
Yeah. That was my mate David English. Yeah.
Exactly, Lord Bunbury.
And Dave, because we see the clip of the David with the Bee Gees, didn't we, doing
absolutely.
The dance?
Yeah.
But it was the fella in Bermuda who lived in Bermuda. His name's gone off the top of my head. I could tell you 100 times out of 100, But I mean, he lifted that. That was when he sat down with them at the beginning of the Bee Gees. He said, "I want you to do me 12 songs," and they come back and they only had 11, I think. And he said, to bring this album out, we've got to have 12. He said, "I want you to go away and write me another song." This is how good they were, And they went outside and they sat by the lift shaft.
Yeah.
With the Echo, and they knocked out New York mining disaster because that was in the news at the time about something, and they picked up on it, and they just and then I walked through the West End of London one day through the big music store there, and they had that on full blast, and everyone was kind of half tears, you know.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. It was so touching, the song. But to sit down next to a lift shaft, knock that song out and put the music to it and take it into, uh, I nearly had his name there. uh,
It'll come to you by the
it'll
end of
go.
the
It'll go.
podcast.
Yeah, it comes to me when the cricket comes on.
Back to
But
cricket.
that's what these geniuses. I mean, Al and I just drove back, and we have Elton John
Yeah.
on the way back and up there on the way back, and you just sit there, uh, you're just racking your brains to find, wonder how Elton John and Bernie Taupin, with the words, send the words over, and he puts some music to them, and it's just total perfection. Uh, and I've sat down and wrote songs. I mean, anyone can write a song, really.
Yeah.
Just putting the music to it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's the key. That's the key. And it's all these great actors and film stars and all that. They don't realise that without the music, they wouldn't have a job.
100%. I was half
You know.
expecting Elton when he finished off Glastonbury. He was the person that again brought the curtain down, didn't he, on Glastonbury? I was half expecting him to walk on the stage.
I've been told that we were misled again about his performance. I heard he half showed himself up.
In what way?
His voice has gone, and I've heard it from about 3 or 4 sources that all the media hype on his performance was just trash.
Again, I think they will, and I did notice at one stage he was actually reading the auto cue for the words of the song, but falling short of that, I did expect him to walk on stage and wish Alan Hudson a happy belated 72nd birthday, because he did that at Wembley.
Oh, that would have been fun.
1975, wouldn't it? I said to my missus, I wonder if Woody's going to walk on stage.
Well, if I was with him the night before, I probably would have. That's how strange life can be. I must break in for a minute. We were at Newmarket Races yesterday, and me and Al, we come out of the hotel, and we were talking about the difference between English and other people, and we bumped into this couple, and they were delightful. We started talking, and they were Australian.
Yeah.
And I backed England to win the test, and cancelled my bet before I met these people yesterday. And anyway, Al, as we do in our family, got him into the marquee, friend in the marquee with us, and they had the fellow went to me halfway through. He says, "It's like boarding there. It was like boarding." He said, "Meeting you and your son was like boarding an aeroplane." He said, and as we walk on the turn right, they say, "No, you go left into the upper class." He said, and that's what you brought. He said, it's been absolutely, seriously nice, man. They had the most marvellous time. They ran out of champagne, which tells you it was good. Mainly on our table.
Did they have any Crown Royal?
They didn't. They didn't. But that would have spoiled it. The Crown Royal, you only drink that when it won the jackpot,
Although you was drinking it at 3:30 a.m., you were feeling melancholy. I can never say that word.
Don't worry about it. They know what you mean, Paul.
And it felt time that you just got back from a night out with the boys. You sat down at your bar, you fixed your favourite drink, and you started writing your book. That was back in 1981 on your 30th birthday, wasn't it?
Yeah, 30th birthday.
Yeah.
That was and that was all down to Mr. Waddett. And I said to Al yesterday, I said, there's one thing I did wrong when I was in Seattle. I should have made sure that Tony came over and stayed with us for a few months, and he would never have come back to England, I don't think, because the people would have fell in love with him, because he's the kind of man that could hold an audience, and when he spoke, you listened, and I don't know if the Americans would understand what he was talking about, but he was such a character that he would have made sure that they understood, and that was my only regret in Seattle, apart from getting the sack of course, but I could have played that differently. But I'm not devious enough,
Absolutely.
You've got to be devious.
But
But it's a great story, isn't it? It's a great path, you know.
Yeah.
As the reason I brought that up, because as the Australian said, he said, you know, like as we all know, that you go down through a path in life, and if you turn right, you can walk in a danger. You turn left, and you're in heaven, you know.
SRB Media.
Absolutely. And walking away from Arsenal, you referenced the song Take a Chance on Me. It wasn't really a chance. I'm amazed that no football club in this country coming for you. You were at your prime. You were 27 years of age. You were the best midfield player that we got in this country. It was quite incredible. There was no chance to be taken, but there wasn't any takers for you, incredibly. And you did then go off to Seattle, a new life on the other side of the pond. How did you feel going out there, Al, and really being rejected from English football? Which, to be fair, is no surprise because you were a player.
Well, firstly, you know, if I'd have had longer with Jimmy Gabriel, they paid 100 grand for me. I think the biggest fee at that time in America. I would have said to him, "Don't give him 100 grand, give him 20 grand, because I'm not going anywhere unless, you know, they reduce." I'd have said to Jimmy Gabriel, "You can have 10 grand of it. I'll have 10 grand of it, and they can pay the club." So they're getting 70 grand off the fee, and that goes back into the Sounders' coffers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we could have done a deal that way, but again, you've got to be devious, and you've got to think. But I should have done it because of the grief that he gave me, the manager. They should have compensated me.
Yeah.
Because I told you the story about cup final tickets. I was explaining to someone yesterday because someone sent me a photograph with the fat Stan Flashman with Osgood and all that, and they're doing the ticket for the 1967 cup final. And in '78, when we got to the final, Terry Neal sold the director's tickets to Stan Flashman. Now, if that's not a sackable offence, what is?
Absolutely.
You know. But it's everything. But when it all boiled down to it, you know, I was the kind of the villain of the scene of the piece, really. You know, and to answer your question, really, you know, when I got on the aeroplane and I'd already signed the contract, Ken Fryer got me the most brilliant contract that I've ever had, and I wouldn't have asked for it if I'd have done it myself. But I got it, and to actually get on that aeroplane and leave England was like being reborn. It was like coming out of coma, really.
Yeah.
You know, so it was an incredible time because America was in full tilt then. The pound and the dollar was magnificent. You know, everybody coming to stay with me didn't want to come home. You know, so that's what kind of nation it is, you know, or was. Yeah, just watching all the shootings going on over there at the moment.
Yeah, it's a different place, isn't it now?
Yeah, it's a different. You're not safe over there now, you know, and that's terrible. It all goes down to politics again, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Your first game was ended out in a shootout. What was your final game there at Seattle? Can you remember?
The final game, I missed a penalty, didn't I?
The final game at Seattle Sounders?
Yeah. And I got accused of missing it on purpose.
Oh, right, okay.
By the new owners, yeah. And he said, we're not renewing your contract. Now I should have played. I was injured, so I should have been injured.
Yeah.
Then they can't sack you. So once again, you know, we've been through this on your show. It's all about having someone to, you know, like not playing for England again. If someone had said to me, pack up after the Germany game, I would have just packed up. That would have been the greatest thing I could have ever done. And that would have been iconic, really. You know, it would have been in all the pub quizzes. A 23-year-old footballer retiring from international football. Well, people would have asked questions, wouldn't they?
They certainly would, because it would have had shades of Peter Knowles for Wolverhampton Wanderers in that, wouldn't it? Because that's what Knowlesy did, and you know, his legend and his icon just carries on, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but I don't think I'd make a very good Jehovah's Witness, though. Somehow. Yeah, I mean, Peter Knowles he would have been the World Cup Swan in '66. Ramsey wouldn't have played him, obviously, because like Southgate today, he didn't play best players, so that's why. But Peter Knowles would have been in good company. He's standing on the line, sitting on the line with Jimmy Greaves, wouldn't he?
Absolutely.
Probably two of the greatest talents we've had, both sitting on the bench. And, you know, the win at all costs method wins, you know. It's amazing how people, you know, we started it the other night, 1966 and all that, you know. We were we never really, it kind of shows that how lucky we were, but people never talk about it, you know.
Yeah.
And they show the goals of Jeff Hurst, and they never really talk about they do it in other countries, you know, when we won the World Cup. I mean, I was just reading Maradona's book and how we won the World Cup, you know, and it was all about how they went about, you know. But if he'd have been English, he wouldn't have got a game. And then we had the greatest probably player that ever lived, and he wouldn't have got a game in the English team because he wouldn't have conformed to what Ramsey wanted him to do, you know. And if Nobby Stiles tried to kick him in a five-a-side, I think Nobby would have broke his foot.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's the way of the world. That is why England are second-rate international nation now, you know.
They certainly are. Is there any song that reminds you of leaving Seattle and coming back to this country? Because you then had a call, you went back to Chelsea, you were not getting a game. Lord only knows why, because Chelsea were a second division team in those days. But then you got that move for a month to go to Stoke City, and we've covered that in the Return of the Prodigal Son. That really was the great escape. But before you come back, where was your mind? You'd finished there. You'd missed a penalty. You'd been accused of missing a penalty on purpose. What was going through Alan Hudson's mind? Because again, you know, you were what were you, about 30, 31 at that time?
Yeah, I had no. I knew I was never going to play in the first division again. That was quite clear because their legs were going, injuries were catching up. Once you start getting hamstring injuries and groin strains, at that time of your career, it's time to call it a day, you know. So what I did really was I moved back into Chelsea where my family were, and the obvious club to go to was back at Chelsea because Osgood had been there before. And it was only a stone's throw from where I was living, so it came in handy. And John Neal was the manager at the time, and he didn't want to sign me. He tried everything in his power to get me out of his office, you know. But and then all of a sudden they went on a pre-season tour down in Wales, deep into Wales, and we had a ball down there to five. Mickey Droy, myself, Rose Brown, Dal Jasper, bless him. And we had a ball down there, and I just said to them one day, over a few glasses of wine, about training tomorrow, I said, you know that beach? I says, I'm going to run that lot off their legs tomorrow, because I didn't like anyone in the first team. You know, they're not. Colin Pates and John Bumstead, they were a class apart. Big Eddie Ingar, Eddie needed whiskey. He was a good lad, but he wouldn't throw out to me. I'd still rib him now. I did him the other week. I said, you still kicking it 60, 70 yards out the field? He said, I can't do no more, Al. I said, well, you better start throwing it out again, hadn't you? So I still just give him one in the ribs over there every time I see him. And I went on the reason I mentioned the beaches, I ran them off their legs. And Mickey Droy and all the stragglers were at the back, you know. And there's one person I couldn't catch was Paul Cannonville. He was like, he was like if I may say this, he was like a Black Forest Gump. It was unbelievable, mate. If I'd have had wings, I wouldn't have caught this fella. Anyway, I got. He packed up, and where I packed up and put my hands on my knees like you do when you're exhausted, he just walked away as if he'd been out for a stroll and get the Sunday papers, you know. And I looked over to my left, and who's sitting by on the there was a row of chairs there, and Ken Bates was sitting there with a girl called Sheila Marston.
Oh.
And I don't know what was going on there. I got a good idea what was going on, but they seemed as if they were having a little tiff. And I never thought no more of it. And I got back to London. And we got back to London. I was all but going to pack my bags and try and get another club. And Batesy called me into the director's box, the director's room, you know. And he said, "I want you to sign for me." I said, "But you're not the manager." He said, "No, I'm the owner."
Mm.
He said, "So I'm signing you." So he signed me, all because of that.
Blimey.
Because what he's saying in training, he knew that I weren't going there to mess about and just, like most players do, pick their money up and sit on the bench and sit on their arse, you know.
Yeah.
So that was probably another a little stroke of luck that goes my way. I mean, the misfortunes in my life, I think they far outweigh the successes, as Alan Hinton's book, you know, the triumph and the tragedy, you know. But that was a defining moment, really, because then I started playing in the reserves. I told you about when we played the first team, they couldn't get the ball off us, you know, and that kind of stuff, and that led to a phone call at Christmas from the man up above, Mr. Waddington. And so that part of my life was all up, but I was like on a roller coaster downwards. And then he just, and the month loan up there, you know, Stoke hadn't won 2 games in a row for over a year. They hadn't won 3 games all season. That was by January. I signed for Stoke twice, both in January around the same time. And then I had 4 games. You know, everybody laughed. You know, apart from a few people in the crowd, one person had a banner up at his back. We've got a chance, you know. But I didn't believe that when I walked out to play my first game against Arsenal, which was unbelievable, because I walked out in Arsenal and there I am making my second debut for Stoke against them, and who's in charge but Don Howe. And he kind of looked at me and laughed, you know, because he tried to talk me out of going to Seattle and wanted me to stay at Arsenal. And I said, "Too late, Don." I said, "I signed the contract." So he said, "Neil, you're foolish. Don't go over there. What a waste." But he was wrong, because it was the experience of a lifetime. If I hadn't went to Seattle, if you look at the bigger picture, young Anthony wouldn't be where he is today, would he?
Absolutely.
In fact, he wouldn't even be born. I don't think, because I don't know. Went round to see Maureen, because I was never there to have to give her a baby. I don't think. Although my granddaughter was a ringing, you know, spitting image of Anthony.
Yeah.
So that's another shadow in our family, you know, who is a real father. In fact, Alan's girlfriend phoned in 2 days ago and said, "You know, she's," because we got her photos on the wall here as we were seeing, and Joe said to Alan, "Do you know something? Our Stephen Marie is a spitting double of Anthony." Al said, he said, when I was working away, he said, "Was he popping round?" See, it's so like him, it's scary, you know. She even laughs like him. He's got a couple of his little moves, you know. So the family thing I mean, I was talking to Alan's girlfriend yesterday. I was telling her all about this, how things go, what path you go down, and how things can always come back to your family root, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You know. So I suppose I was heading into, apart from sight, going back on loan. It's a new adventure, especially if Al goes to work with Anthony. It's a new adventure, isn't it?
100%. Life and football is about adventures, and you have situations that present themselves, and you either take it or you don't take it. So you're at Stoke City. You left them for the second time, but the second time you retired. That was 1986, wasn't it, Al? Because you had the Great Escape season when you come back and saved Stoke City in the 83-84 season, but then the 84-85 season, you were blighted by injuries and you hardly kicked a ball in anger, didn't you?
Well, it was another managerial disaster, wasn't it? It was I'll never forget the day we saved.
And to listen to the rest of this podcast, head on over to www.patreon.com/SRB Media. Thank you.